Hey y'all, it is Andrea here at VW Family Farm, and I've already made one video about trying out a sourdough starter. It's a sourdough starter. Let me in fact just grab it. When we ended the last video in this series, I had split Otis, the sourdough starter, from Mindful Farmer and Whispering Willow. I had gotten that from them kind of as an experiment just to see how it goes, because I'm on the search for the perfect sourdough loaf, in my opinion, let me say that. And I had rehydrated it, fed it, and gotten it split into 4 starters. There's 2 more in the fridge for backups at a later time. But today's video, we are gonna actually take this and bake with it. And I wanna show you how this turns out and just give you, just let you see for yourself how it turns out and if it's something that you're interested in or not. I've tried multiple sourdough starters making my own. I bought one from Azure Standard and now this one. And so far, I love the bread. I love all sourdough bread. I say I haven't met one I don't like, but I haven't found the perfect loaf either. So we're gonna give this a go. I've got my instructions printed out here. Now, Mindful Farmer and Whispering Willow actually made a whole course on this. And so you can sign up for that if you're interested. Probably at the end of this video, you'll know if you're going to be interested or not. But anyway, that's where I got the starter. I'll link that below just for anyone that's interested. But first thing we're going to do is we are going to, this whole course is in grams. So there's so much information that helps you know why you're doing what you're doing with this baking, and if you want to tweak things, if you don't like something about it, they teach you how to do that, how to change one thing at a time and get the loaf to your desired preferences. But these have about 200 grams, 210 grams each. We're going to take about 100 grams or so out of each one of these, and we're going to start there. We're going to get our flour and water measured out, and we're going to get going. Now, one disclaimer I want to make to you guys is this is not a loaf of bread that you're going to make in like an hour. This is a loaf of bread you're going to make over the course of a day, but you're just going to do little bitty steps at a time. Like I'm starting one day and I'm not going to bake until the next day. You'll figure out your best times to bake. If you want to bake at night, you probably need to start this process at night. But I'm going to start this today and I'm going to do a few steps, and then tomorrow morning I'll be baking these for breakfast. I'll have fresh bread tomorrow morning. So let's get going. First things first, I'm going to have these sourdough starters and I'm going to get my stuff measured out. So I'm actually going to make 2 loaves today, so I'm doubling everything, and all the measurements are in the course and printable PDF directions that you can print off. So I'm using quite a bit more than you would if you were just going to make 1 loaf. That's why this might look like quite a bit of flour. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to add some water. Now this is out of my Berkey. I would recommend filtered water, but you can use just tap water. It's just the chlorine might affect your sourdough. It might slow down your fermentation or affect it a bit. It's just, keep that in mind. The better water you have access to, the better. So I'm just gonna add the water. This is my bowl to my KitchenAid stand mixer. I'm just gonna add these together, and that is basically step 1. We're not even going to add this sourdough starter in at this point. So you can mix this by hand, literally just put your hand in there and start mixing, get this all mixed up. It's just flour and water, get the lumps out. I'm gonna actually use my dough hook and do this in my stand mixer, and I'm just gonna do it until I feel like it's not lumpy anymore. Few minutes, maybe 2 or 3 minutes, and then we're gonna let this rest. That's when the gluten is going to get going and get activated. We're gonna let this rest for about 30 minutes. It's gonna be doing just some chemical reactions. There's no starter in here at this point, so it's not like it's fermenting at this point or starting to rise or anything like that. It's just going to get that gluten forming and going. And at this point, another thing I want to mention that's very important, and they mentioned this in the course, and I'm a firm believer in this just from bread making. Bread flour has a much higher protein or gluten content. It's a really great thing to think about using. You can get, if you can't afford like high quality bread flours, there's store brand bread flours. There's all kinds of options available for every budget. So, but it does make better bread. So you can see how I've mixed long enough. It's cleaned the bowl for me. It's pulled away. I'm going to pull this out and I'm just going to let this rest for about 30 minutes. So it has been 30 minutes, and I did want to mention to put a damp towel over it. You can see it's already, you see this stretching. The gluten chains are forming. It's looking like it's supposed to. So now we are gonna do the next step. I'm gonna rinse this dough off my hand. We're gonna add in the sourdough starter and some salt. And again, these are measured by weight in grams. So you just need to measure those out. We're gonna put those in there. We're gonna mix them for a few minutes, and then we're gonna let it rest another 30 minutes. Another important tip is get this off your hands and your dishes as quick as you can, because it almost becomes just glued on there. If you wait too long, you really need to soak stuff to be able to get it off. I'm going to run some water in this little measuring cup, and then it'll rinse right out. But if you let it dry, it gets rock hard. All right, y'all, so we have let it sit undisturbed for about 30 minutes. Excuse my red face. I have been exercising, and that's the beauty of this. You can work this into just your daily routine. So I'm going to show you the next step, and in the course and the videos and all that, they're going to show you exactly how to do all of this. There's video format and written, which I really like because I'm a visual learner. And like I told you before, this recipe has a lot more steps than I'm used to doing, but they're easy steps. They're just little things to make your bread better. So let's get going. I'm going to show you this bowl. So we have added the flour and water, and then we went back and added in the starter and the salt. So you can see down here what this looks like, and you're going to use your hands at this point. So I'm just going to do what's called stretch and folds. I'm just going to stick my hand on in here. I'm going to pick it up, and I'm going to stretch it, and I'm going to fold it just like it sounds like. And the texture has definitely changed dramatically from when we first started. You can see it's not sticking to the bowl. It's one big thing of dough. And so changes are happening now. So I'm just going to stretch and fold. I'm just going around this bowl. I'm probably going to go around it twice, so about 8 stretch and folds. And then I'm going to wait 30 minutes, and I'm going to do this again. So I'm going to wind up doing this a total of 5 times, because I'm going to do this over the next 2 hours. So this is number 1, and then in 30 minutes I'll do it again, and so on until you've done this 5 times. And then we will be ready to move on. I mentioned this briefly a little bit ago, but I have realized over watching this course and taking this course, one big thing I was doing wrong is letting my dough dry out. So I'm keeping a damp cloth over this bowl, and you'll see me keeping damp cloths over everything throughout this today, every step I do. And that is simply because if you let your dough dry out, it'll almost get a crust on it, and then not good things are going to happen, because it can't rise and expand as easily if you have a hard crust on it. It's just, you're not going to have as good a result. So I would encourage you put something over it. If your bowl has a lid, that will keep some moisture in and air out. Just whatever you have that you could put over it. A plastic bag, a shower cap, something like that to put over it throughout all the steps. So I actually had done some of those stretch and folds before I got back around to filming. So I've actually finished my stretch and folds at this point. It's been 2 hours. And but for the sake of video, I want you guys to kind of see it as it's happening. But once the stretch and folds are over, you are simply going to let it ferment for about 8 hours. You're going to leave this on your countertop. You can walk away. You can see if you started this in the morning by, you know, late morning, depending on how early you start, you could be walking away and letting it ferment for the rest of the day, and you're free to, you know, leave the house or go do whatever. There's no more steps for the next 8 hours, I guess is what I'm saying. So that's pretty easy. And then we'll come back tonight. Probably I'll be in here cooking supper anyway, and we'll move on to the next step. So again, work it into your schedule. Don't make bread making or sourdough making burdensome. Just make it fit your schedule. Hey y'all, so as I started making this video, everything around here has kind of went haywire. As some of you know, my dad has been very ill the last few months, and so I wound up at the hospital with him overnight, spending the night in the ER and then the hospital. So Emily and Lane actually filmed, I was walking them through on the phone how to do the final steps. So I'm going to show you guys how after the 8 hours at room temp of the fermenting, how they did the shaping and all the final steps to get it ready to bulk ferment, which was in the fridge overnight. So I'm going to show you the steps that they did to get it ready to go in the fridge. So they got that done. You need to stick it in the fridge, cover it with a shower cap, a damp cloth, something like that. You just want to keep it moist. That's very, very important. And then I'm going to show you on this final step, we're about to bake it, one other very important step for baking sourdough. So I'm going to go grab it and then we will do the final steps. So just keeping it real here, Lane and Emily forgot a very important step, but I'm going to give them grace because they were doing this over the phone. They did not cover these with a damp cloth. So you can see what happens when you don't. It's almost, it didn't rise as much. It's kind of got a crust on the top. Now, that may affect things here. So let's keep that in mind as we go forward. But if you are going to bake in a Dutch oven, one thing that they recommend on the course, and this is pretty important, is that you warm it up. So I am going to bake in a Dutch oven. If you do, you're going to get less of a really dark crust. If you bake in something like an enamel roasting pan or something like that, it's going to give you a darker crust. So this is going to do a bit lighter crust, which I like. It's still going to be kind of honey golden brown, but I am going to have to preheat this. So I've got my oven on. Again, recipes I've used in the past don't bake this high of temperature. We're going to bake at 450. So I'm going to go ahead and pop my pans in there. I'm going to get these out of here and do the final. I'm going to go ahead and score them and give them a place to expand. Don't know how this is going to go because they did kind of dry out on the top, but we're going to give it a go. So while those are preheating, I want to just mention another important thing too. I have several things ordered that I'm getting ordered and sent to me to just make my bread making the next level. You can see this Banneton bowl. It's a round one. This is called a bowl, B-O-U-L-E, but you can also get the batard, which is going to make more of a loaf. I really want to try those because that will make it easier to like have the right shape for like sandwiches and just different things I want. I like the round, and that's traditionally what you see sourdough, but I really want to try the loaf style. And then I'm going to bake them in. You saw I have two Dutch ovens. One's round, one is like more of an oval shape. So I'm going to be baking in those. But another important thing I'm ordering, and I've had a hard time finding it locally, so I'm just ordering some online. You can get it pretty much anywhere online, is rice flour. That's going to help. You saw, I don't know if you could see me trying to get the dough out of what it proofed in overnight. It was a little bit stuck. Again, the kids were doing this. They've never done it. I've just done this myself. Bread making is kind of my thing. And so, but if you would dust rice flour kind of in the bottom of this Banneton bowl, or if you proof it in a Dutch oven or any kind of bowl, it won't stick and then it'll slide right out. And then when you get ready to bake, I'm going to sprinkle just some wheat flour in my pans here in a minute, but you really should sprinkle that rice flour. It won't burn as much, and it won't, your bread won't stick. When your bread is baked, it'll slide right out. So, but for today, I'm using wheat flour, and I would suggest you guys do the same. If you don't know if you're really going to want to do this or not, don't invest in a bunch of bowls and special flours and things until you see. And then if you're like, this is fun, I could work this into my daily routine, then get you some supplies. So normally I would not have my dough laying up on a lid on the stove, but once I get the more of the Banneton bowls, the wooden bowls, it will stay in that until I'm ready to transfer it into these Dutch ovens. But for now, I'm proofing in these Dutch ovens as well, at least one of them. And so that's the purpose for that, but that's not the end goal. So I'm going to use this. This was pretty cheap. It's just pretty much a glorified razor blade. And I'm going to score this. I think there's a fancy term, but basically I'm just giving a way for this dough to expand. And as it puffs up, you'll see it looks really cool as well when it gets done, but it gives it a way for it to rise and expand as it bakes. One key to this is put a lid on it while it bakes. I'm going to bake it half the time with the lid, and then I'm going to take the lid off and I'm going to let it brown. It'll be pretty much baked, but I'm going to let it brown and crisp up. But that's going to keep the moisture in. That's going to help it to rise. That, I think, is one of the keys to making good sourdough. Also wanted to mention here, one of the things they teach you in the course is the poke test. So I just poked into this bread. You can see it's springing back. If it springs back, and they say it could take, 10 seconds or so, and it is springing back, it is proofed. It's ready to be baked. If it's underproofed, then it's not going to spring back. It's not risen enough yet. If it's overproofed, it's just going to deflate. And I've had that happen so many times. That's generally what happens to me. This is springing back. This did not rise as much as I want, but I think it's because the kids didn't put the bag over it or the moist towel or anything like that. It just dried out. And then when it gets that hard kind of crust on it, it just can't rise anymore. So I'm hoping it's still going to be okay. We're going to see how forgiving this recipe is. But I'm going to score this one, bake it, and I'll show you the final result. I'm going to set my timer here. One thing I did also, because the tops did dry out, was I put that, you could see I flipped it over and I put that dry side down. So maybe the top is going to go ahead and rise and be okay. We shall see. Okay, it got finished. Let me show you the end result. I'm pressing on it. I wanted you to see that it's not super hard. It's soft inside. I'm gonna be honest with you guys. I baked a test run before I made this video to see how it was going to turn out. It turned out fantastic. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to make a video and we'll see if it turns out again, because sometimes things turn out and then you never can replicate them again, especially with things like bread and all kinds of things like that. It turned out really well. So this is the first loaf that I baked, and look at that awesomeness. I've always wanted to bake sourdough that had all those holes in it. For one, that just means that it rose really well, and I've never accomplished it no matter what recipe I used. And I want to point out, you saw how well these loaves rose, and we actually had some mishaps in between. I didn't do things right on schedule because I got called away, and then the kids skipped the step of the moist towels or the lid or whatever, and it didn't seem to hurt it at all. I really don't know that it could have turned out any better. It just looks great to me. I'm super pleased. I am going to link the course below in case you're interested. I give this a thumbs up. I'm going to try some more things, but pretty much with sourdough starters, bread is the ultimate test. It's really one of the most difficult things to get sourdough to rise. But if you have a good starter, it's not hard. But before a starter is ready for bread, you can make all kinds of things. So bread is kind of like the final thing that you have to have a really well-fed starter for, and turned out beautiful. So I will definitely be doing this. I'm going to try to incorporate this into my weekly baking. I'd really like to get back to where I make our bread from sourdough. I like it. It's good for your gut health because it already has been through that fermentation process. There's lots of health benefits to it. Lots of people who can't handle wheat can handle sourdough. I'm not saying everyone. There is true gluten allergies and celiac disease and stuff like that. But you can also take this and use different types of flours. You could experiment with gluten-free flours, all that kind of stuff. So anyway, it's a winner for me. I'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks for watching. Love and appreciate you. Thanks for all the kind comments, emails, everything you guys send our way. We appreciate it. God bless.